everyone. Thank you for joining us for episode 34 of Typewriter Talks. Typewriter Talks is an online series where we interview Tampa Bay authors and get inside their brains. And today we have John Kile. John is a freelance writer, a blogger, and an author. And full disclosure, he has been on our Keep St. Pete Lit board since the dark ages. That's kind of true. Yeah.
The dark ages, or is it like the Big Bang?
Big Bang.
When the universe formed, right?
Yeah. Well, and I was like, who do I interview? And I was like, wait, John's doing all these things in the community now. And, and I like talking to you. So tell us what you're working on right now.
Oh gosh. Well, probably the big project that I'm working on is I'm working on a bit of a memoir that is sort of focusing on a few years ago I was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition called vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it's not what my life is all about, but it's kind of been a big part of my life the last few years and will be. And there's not really a good book out there on the topic of this condition because it is so rare. And one day I was just like, there needs to be a book on this, and I guess I need to write it. Mm-hmm. But I also don't want to write something that's just for this rare disease, because then, who's going to read it? Because there's only about, not too many of us out there. So it's more about the whole perspective that having a serious medical condition dropped in your lap, and the spiritual sort of, bomb that drops on you, and how I've kind of changed my perspective on life. So that's kind of like been floating out there forever. But on a daily basis, I write a little bit for the Gabber, which is over there based in Gulfport. I do some stuff for Neptune magazine, which is Denzel Johnson Green's poetry and literature and essay magazine, which is awesome. And I've been writing for the Northeast Journal, which is kind of a fancy little newspaper that goes around to parts of St. Petersburg. I've written for Catalyst and St. Pete Life and other things like that, but those are the main things I'm doing right now. Mm-hmm. So and I have a blog. Don't Make Me Turn This Van Around, which is all about my family's crazy travels, and kind of ties in with the topic of the memoir I'm working on. So.
Mm-hmm. So what is your writing process like?
What is my writing process like? It probably depends on what I'm working on. What I've found when I'm writing something for like a community, for a website or a community newspaper type of thing, the best stuff I write comes fast. It's like, I come up with an idea and it just like, it writes itself, Mm-hmm. I find that if I'm struggling with the topic or I'm forcing a topic because I didn't know what I wanted to write about, and I'm, deleting and working on it for days and days and trying to get my hands around it, I might come up with something that's, fair enough. But the best stuff is like falls out, just like boom, couple hours, it's pretty much ready to go. I mean, I might, I'll certainly edit and tweak and refine, but the meat of it doesn't change that much. Lately, I'll kind of go backwards. Initially, when I, 6-7 years ago, when I said, I really am going to be a writer now. I was an oil salesman and that was my full-time job, but I had this idea of becoming a novelist. I was writing at night, we had a young baby, everybody went to bed, and I wrote from like 10 o'clock at night till midnight.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for me anymore. I go to bed early now. My wife's a marathoner. She's up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's in bed by 9 o'clock. I don't really feel like writing until midnight while everybody else is sleeping, then sleeping while everybody else is awake. So I started, I'm like on day 3 of this because it's the new year, getting up, not quite when my wife gets up to go running, because that's like 4:45. And that's still, for me, that's like, is there an airplane to catch? No. Okay, stay in bed. but I've been getting up around 6:15, 6:30 and taking that first couple hours in the morning and working on it. And then actually after the lights are off and I'm laying in bed, and instead of scrolling stupid Facebook and
Yeah.
Instagram at night before I fall asleep, I'm actually going through and Google Drive, on my phone, reading what I've written, doing little edits and stuff like that. I find that puts me to sleep. So
Your own
that's
thing puts
kind
you
of
to sleep.
and I am a big outliner. I have notebooks and electronic notes and everything. I use Scrivener for my big projects, and I try to have an outline, because the first time I tried to write a novel without an outline, just kind of flying by the seat of my pants, total disaster. I wrote myself off into a corner, and it
Mm.
was a total disaster. So I really try to stick to outlines when it's a big project. Otherwise, you can end off in the woods. So.
Because your first book is fiction, do you think you'll go
Mhm.
back to fiction after this, or do you have an idea for a fiction idea?
Yeah, well, since the topic of this is typewriter talks, my initial plan, 6, 7 years ago, when I thought I was a healthy person and had no cares in the world,
Yeah.
was this idea where you self-publish a book every few months, and you build this sort of snowball of putting out a book, writing a series, making the first one free, and building a readership. And even if it's only 5,000 readers only, you know selling books for $1 or $2 or $3 on Kindle, and building this sort of mass of that was my initial plan. So I wrote that first novel with really the idea of self-publishing it, not really marketing it until I had two or three to go with it.
Yeah.
That first one I kind of pounded out in a year, rough draft, edit, publish, book cover, all that stuff, and then kind of just threw it out there. I was writing the second book when my when I had an aneurysm rupture, and all this other stuff happened. And I've been writing it. I mean, the rough draft was done 5 years ago, and I've been editing it, putting it aside,
Yeah.
editing it some more, rewriting, editing, putting it aside. I mean, it's pretty much done, but as a focus on what I want to do moving forward, it's sort of gone on the back burner, or side burner. I
Yeah.
have somebody who's supposed to be editing it right now. She's had her own issues, and so it's kind of like, okay, I'm glad someone else is supposed to be looking at this right now, so it's not
Yeah.
bothering me. But yeah, I mean, I have a second novel done, and it may see the light of day at some point.
Mhm.
But my focus really moving forward, I'm not saying I won't go back to fiction at some point, but I've changed a lot as a writer in the last 6 or 7 years. And today, if I were to write my first novel, it wouldn't be the one I wrote. And that's not to say I don't like that book, but I see its flaws and I see its benefits, and it's been fine, and reviews and response has been great. But it's not what I would do today, because I'm not trying to churn out 4 books a year like I thought
Yeah.
I was going to.
It's funny how life changes.
Yeah,
We get this fixed idea of how we think we need to be, not just in life, but as creatives. And
yeah, yeah,
stuff shifts. Like you have children, or you have an aging parent, or you're you get too much work, or like my first poetry book, there was like 4 years between, or less than that, from between my first and maybe it was 5. Wow. Okay. And then the third book, it's like up to 10 years, but it's like, I've been working and a single parent, and it's just like, you have to just let yourself be
yeah.
okay with where life takes you sometimes as a creative.
It's funny because I look at, like, I spent a lot of time looking at what other authors were doing, and particularly at first at what the independent self-published authors were doing, and and they were sort of 6, 7 years ago was not new, but what they were
Yeah.
doing was still relatively revolutionary in
Yeah.
terms of just going independent, not dealing with publishers, not dealing with bookstores, and all that stuff. Now that market has become so crowded that it's hard to be original. And that's not to say that it's not a worthy avenue to take. In fact, it's still probably just as realistic to become a successful self-published author as it is to be traditionally published. It's just as hard now.
Yeah.
It's not like you know, both traditional publishing and traditional book publishers, which have been, struggling mightily for years, you know, they're very focused on just their big names, and if you're a small name, they might throw a little bit at you and give you a shot. But if you don't turn a
Yeah.
profit fast, bye, and it's kind of the same. You can spend a lot of time on the independent side. It's like, so you're playing the lottery either way. I mean, obviously hard work comes into it, but you're going to have some luck as well.
Mm-hmm. So what would be the advice you'd give your younger writer self?
Start sooner.
Hmm.
I was doing creative writing on the side when I was, back when I was in my 20s and college.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would spend a lot of time writing just really funny long emails to friends,
You are funny. You're a very funny person. Yeah.
just because I wasn't doing anything else. And then there was probably 10 years where I didn't do anything, but I always thought in the back of my mind, I've got to do this. I've got to write a novel. I've got to come up with an idea and finish it. And so by the time I did that, I was, almost 40.
Mm.
And I wish I'd started sooner, because you have to write some really awful stuff before you start to get to the good stuff.
Mm.
Even if you're a good storyteller,
Yeah.
even if you think you're a good writer, even if you are a good writer but you haven't had success yet, which, I mean, I would not describe myself as having success. um, you've got to get some of that garbage out in order to know what the good stuff is. You have to start to recognize when you're writing something that's good versus when you're not. And
Mhm.
it takes experience, period.
Yeah.
You need to have that experience of writing, and you need to read a lot. And there was a period of time also where I was not, I was career oriented, I was, social life, all that stuff. I wasn't reading as much. And and you've got to learn to recognize what you like in writing as well. So, but
So
those are not like, original pieces of advice. But I would say start younger. But if you're old, start now.
yeah.
There's no time like the present.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right now you're the youngest you're ever going to be.
exactly.
That's the attitude I try to keep. Like you're
Yeah.
the youngest you're ever going to be. So speaking of reading, what are some of your favorite authors or what are you reading right now?
um I can answer both of those if you want. What am I reading right now? A friend of mine recently asked me if I'd read The Count of Monte Cristo by Dumas, and,
Oh,
and I hadn't. I mean, there's like a million classics that I probably should have read that I haven't. Um, and that's one of those books that you can grab on like the Gutenberg Project, which is like free
yeah.
books because it's out of, copyright or whatever. And so I'm enjoying that. I find that I read the most when I'm reading like three things. If I'm just trying to read one book, I'm slow. But if I'm reading a few things, um, then then I'm much quicker.
Mhm.
Um, my phone just rang too. Maybe the same person's trying to call us.
No,
Um,
my
yeah.
mother.
Okay. Well, I don't think your mom's trying to call.
She's the only one to get through.
Yeah. What else am I reading? I picked up a book on Stoicism, and
Mm,
it's all about it's like little biographies of all the Stoics. I'm honestly not loving it yet, but
yeah.
I'm making myself continue because I keep thinking it's going to get better. Um, I'm always kind of like reading something philosophical
Me too.
or spiritual,
Yeah.
and then trying to read something else. And
It's funny
then my
how they'll
wife Monica,
overlap. It'll
huh?
overlap. It'll overlap
Yeah,
with like whatever you're currently reading. It
yeah.
be like, and it'll totally fit in your life. I always find that.
I also find that if I'm reading two or three things, I'm always ready to pick one of them up, So if I'm not in the mood for what I'm reading,
Hmm.
I'll pick up whatever the other thing is that I'm reading. Whereas if I'm just reading one thing, like I said, I'll be like, I don't feel like reading that right now. I'll do something else. Same with writing. If I'm working on two or three things, I'm a little better at remaining in the habit and in the practice of doing it every day. Whereas if there's just one thing, if I hit a block or I feel like I'm not, in the mood, I'll let it sit. And then the longer you let it sit, the less apt you are to be eager to pick it back up. So a lot of times it's kind of like having a deadline. When you have a deadline, you buckle down. sometimes when I'm working on 2 or 3 things, one of them is gonna, you
Yeah.
know, fit into my mood, you know.
I
So
just thought of a term like being a non-monogamous reader. I'm totally like reading 6 books at once. I'm not loyal to one unless it really grabs me, but I don't
yeah,
find things grab me that much. Like
I
it's
have to agree, and that's the hard thing is like I am not a person who feels like because I picked up a book I have to finish it. You know,
mm, that's important. Don't
if
clean
I'm
you
like a
clean your plate.
third into a book and I'm not getting it, it's not, what I hoped it would be, I am not loyal to it. You know, that's why this book on stoicism, the jacket kind of looked interesting. I kind of picked it up quickly because, we were shopping on like a, you know, reduced capacity, socially distanced shopping at Tom Below Books.
Mhm.
And we'd been there a half an hour and I hadn't picked anything out yet. And I was like, I'll
Oh,
just grab this one,
I always do
and,
feel guilty if I don't buy something at a bookstore. It's like
oh, right.
how criminal. Like I'm breaking
Yeah.
the law. Like this is not okay.
I don't have that problem. I mean, I certainly don't have the problem walking of 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 not being able to pick out a book, but anyway, so I grabbed this one kind of quick, and it seemed interesting, and then I realized that the blurb on the jacket was written by a Republican, and I was like, oh no! So I probably was like, already jaded against it. Like, am I getting some like Ayn Rand, stuff or something? But it's not. It's an interesting book. It's just kind of dry,
Yeah.
and it's not very smart. So I won't even give you the name because I don't even know the name of it. It's about Stoics. It's red.
Yeah, a book about stoicism that's dry and not smart. It
Right.
almost seems, yeah.
Well, it's kind of, yeah. Anyway, I mean, I'm not saying the Stoics weren't smart. I'm just saying the person who wrote it doesn't come off that way.
So, one more question, and then we'll hear some of your writing.
Okay.
I have questions, but I love it when writers I interview, you answer my questions without me asking the questions, which you've pretty much done. So, thank you. And,
Okay.
um, what would be your holy grail piece of writing advice?
Oh, geez. Holy Grail piece of writing advice. Um, Man, I wish I knew like 20 other people's Holy Grail piece of writing
Oh
advice,
no, it's yours.
because that's the kicker. I would say, I mean, don't be afraid to put something down. I think that's the first book I wrote ended up in the trash can, but it was a great experience. And I wrote it as part of the NaNoWriMo, the
Mm.
November National Novel Writing Month. And the idea is you write 50,000 words in 30 days in November, which is like the worst month to try and write 50,000 words because you have
No, it's like
Thanksgiving in there. It's like, how are
Like
you
you,
going to do
if
this?
you have kids, Thanksgiving break, like it's,
Right. It's
yeah.
like the worst. You're trying to write like 10,000 words over the last few days of the month. Um, but what that exercise does is it makes you put down words and lets you, throw away the idea of trying to write something that is perfectly written or beautiful prose and makes you get down a manuscript. Because
Mhm.
once you've got a manuscript, you've got something to work with. Now, you may have to make huge changes to that manuscript, but at least you've got a product, as
Yeah.
opposed to just, starting a few pages and then thinking it's not pretty enough and putting it down. I would say, don't be afraid to just start writing. Even if you think you have writer's block and you can't think of anything to write, just start writing, and because maybe those words that you write aren't usable, but you got them out of the way and they're not gumming up your system anymore. So I would say, regardless of whether or not you're aspiring 20-year-old English major who thinks, I want to make a career out of writing and editing or whatever, or if you're 50 and you've got a great story to tell or a novel in you or something like that, start writing.
Yeah.
You've got to start getting some words down because I guarantee you the first thing you write is not going to be good. It's not going to be what you're capable of.
Mhm.
Um, and but you've got to start. You've got to get some stuff down. That's it's I know some great writers, and if they watch this, they'll know I'm talking about them. Wonderful writers who finish nothing, who stop because they're
Mm.
so good that
Mhm.
that they don't like the stuff that they
I have
write that isn't
know what
great.
you're talking about.
Yes, she's so frustrating,
Yes,
right?
yes. I know what
So,
you're talking about.
but there's a few of us like that.
Mhm.
And I would say, that's one thing that exercise for me was just putting down words and then coming back later and going, okay, I don't like the way I wrote that, but now I have an idea of how I want to write that.
Yeah.
You know,
And
that's my holy grail.
and I think it's cool, like what you say about having multiple projects going on, because I'm sure, like, writing for the Gabber or these other periodicals or papers, it lightens things up a bit for you.
Yeah.
So when you do come to your own page, you can kind of maneuver more. I mean, we can take ourselves so seriously as writers.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes, like, I'm at that point with my third book, like, I just got to get that thing edited and get it out.
Right.
I have mulled over it and mulled over it and mulled over it, and like, I don't know if I'm good enough, and this poetry is different than the other ones, and blah 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 blah. But it's like, I'm at the point now, it's like, get the thing edited and get it out, because if you don't,
You're waiting for it to be
never gonna do it.
perfect. You're
No.
never going to feel like it's perfect. The more perfect it is, the less perfect it is. The more you see what it's not. When I write for the Gabber, it's a column called Renaissance Dad, which is my very arrogant take on parenting, and it's more about just observations as when I had my medical issues, I basically became a stay-at-home dad, and it's a little bit different. There are a million stay-at-home dads out there. There's some that are better writers than I am, and some that are great at it. But it's my they just give me free reign to just write kind of whatever pops up. That's easy. When I write for the Northeast Journal, they give me topics. I have to go out and interview people and write something that's kind of journalistic. And I'm not a journalist, and I always kind of get like, oh, I'm going to write this super interesting article, and then I turn it in, and they're like, we're going to straighten this out into more of a newspaper piece, because I think this is going to be profound. It's like, no, we don't that's not. Just tell this damn story. And then for Denzel with essay, I've never been a big short story person. I don't write short fiction very much, and I've only really written one piece of true, like, actual fiction for him in 3 or 4 episodes or issues that he's done. I always kind of come back to sort of personal take and on stuff. That just seems to be where I'm most comfortable. So,
Well, let's hear the piece that you wrote for this is Neptune issue that just came out in January.
Yeah, and before I read it, let's plug Neptune, okay?
Plug Neptune.
Because
yeah.
Denzel Johnson Green is a young, super talented poet in St. Petersburg, and the guy, everybody's got the idea for putting out together some kind of a literary magazine.
Yeah.
He actually did it.
Yeah.
It's online right now. He's getting a limited print run each month, but every month he's taking submissions. He's requesting submissions from specific people, mostly poets, and it's like 80 pages of like
there's art.
There's photography, there's art, there's poetry, and some essay, and it's really good. I mean, and I'm just really impressed by it. The way you get it is you Venmo Neptune _poetry $5,
mm-hmm.
and then you send Denzel an email,
mm-hmm.
and then give him your email address, and he sees that you gave him $5, and then he sends it to you in the beginning of the month. And
it's
on
great. Instagram. Neptune Poetry's on Instagram, and I also have my poetry in there, and a lot of people in the local community, and it's really
right.
He does a beautiful job.
He does. It's really gorgeous, and I know. I mean, he's just starting, and it's going to get better and better. So, so this is a short piece that I wrote, kind of bringing in the new year, because obviously 2020 was a total disaster for people, and well, without any introduction, I'll read it. It's called The Best New Year, and I tend to start to lose my voice when I talk incessantly, so
it's okay.
I may take a pregnant pause, a dramatic pause. Hindsight is 2020. It's a good saying. We see the past so much more clearly than it was when it was the present. In this year of adversity, we were encouraged by columnists, mental health experts, and yogi bloggers to live in the present. Frankly, I'm looking forward to putting 2020 in my hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
But what changes with the turning of a calendar year? Is there any magic in arbitrarily switching the last digit in the date? The sun is still circling the same Earth. The date is a mere construct of humankind. But still, the new year means something. When the pandemic began, I was 4 years into practicing a practice of meditating daily. I use the word practice in the most pretentious way possible so that you'll picture me breathing steadily with a clear mind, reaching a point of total enlightenment, and even possibly levitating a few inches off the floor. In reality, for me, meditation is putting in my earbuds, playing a 10-minute meditation on my iPhone, and probably dozing off. Some might call it napping. No self-respecting meditation artist falls asleep. I have no self-respect in this matter. All of this to say that, comparatively speaking, I was supposedly well prepared for the mental challenges of navigating a pandemic. My life already consisted of spending most of my time at home with routine walks and trips to the grocery store. But it was interesting to see what 2020 did to the world around me.
Mm-hmm.
2020 made us give up everything in our daily lives that showed us the people, pastimes, and possessions that we really missed, and more significantly, those we didn't. And sometimes we were surprised by what we learned.
Yeah.
For me, the year 2020 came along like a garbage truck and took out the trash in my world. I started to label this essay the worst year, but my year wasn't that bad compared to what others have endured. So far, I'm alive and I haven't gotten COVID-19. I haven't lost a loved one. I didn't lose a job. I've dealt with some significant matters, but I've come away with way more gratitude. Gratitude, there's a buzzword. At its best, gratitude is appreciating what we have in our lives and ignoring our wants. At its worst, gratitude is a word that makes us feel guilty when we feel sorry for ourselves. 2020 has been full of opportunities to put things in perspective, and that's not a bad thing. So what changes at 12 a.m. on January 1st when the Tiffany ball slides down a pole in an empty Times Square? No longer will we be in 2020, the year of the pandemic, the year of the election, the year of conspiracies. 2021 has the potential to wear a different label. The year of the vaccine, the return to normalcy, the year of facts. New Year's Day gives us all a chance to collectively put everything that 2020 symbolized behind us. For me, 2021 will be a new year unlike any other because I want it to be. I'm embracing the astrological jargon of release, rebirth, and renewal. Each new year brings hope. That was for you, Maureen.
No.
Each new year brings hope. And my hope is that this year we will measure gratitude, not in the pain we avoided, but the joy we felt.
Oh, I love that. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful. You put it all into perspective, you know,
What
because
it's all about.
there is a lot, like 2020 sucked, but it's also like, I mean, I've had a really good year in some ways. And there's a little bit of like, people will ask, how are you? And I'm like, am I allowed to say I'm phenomenal?
Right.
Like, I feel better than I ever have in my whole life. Like,
Yeah.
so it's like,
I mean,
are you allowed to say that in the middle of, but you know.
you have to consider your audience. I
Yeah.
have to agree that there are times when someone says, oh, well, once everything goes back to normal, it's like, obviously I'm really looking forward to my kids having a school to go to, for 6 or 7 hours a day.
Me too.
But at the same time, I'm like, does that mean I have to start going to social events I don't want to go to?
Yeah.
Is it wrong to say I kind of like not having plans? We've been very lucky because my family, we bought an RV and we spent a lot of time traveling, socially distanced state parks and national parks and all that sort of stuff, and blogging about it and trying not to look like jerks
Yeah.
while we're having a good time,
Yeah.
while others are working hard and avoiding, losing loved ones. I mean, everything that we do that we enjoy during this time is colored by the suffering that is going on out there, obviously. So.
Well, I think the point is, life is what you make it. If anything, I've learned from you, like be in the present moment and be grateful,
Yeah.
I mean, watching all the things that you've gone through with your health and how your family life has changed and how you all have taken something that could be potentially so devastating and actually are like living your best lives, and you're writing all the time. Like when I first met you, I think you were dabbling in writing, but you were also working full time. And like now you're able to be home and do your work, writing all these, every time I see you, you're juggling all these things. So you're one person that really shows me that it's like life is what you make it, You may not be dealt the cards that are, what you want or what you thought you were going to get, but it is about like the game you play.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Absolutely.
so poetic.
It is. Writing is therapy,
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, probably 90% of what I write may never be read by most people, may never see an audience. But for me, I spent like a year not really writing, really wound up and reading and trying to, seek spiritual, comfort or whatever. But then I realized, like writing is also a very therapeutic activity.
Mhm.
And, so that's what I found is like, just start writing something,
Yeah.
you know.
And for the safety of your friends and family, if you're a writer, for
Exactly.
yourself, like I haven't written in 2 days, and I'm a bit
Yeah.
disgruntled. I was like, I haven't written. I don't feel right. So yeah,
Yeah.
safety of the general public.
Right. You ever
If
write
you
something
are
and
a
they read it and they're
writer,
like, I'm glad I wasn't around you when you were writing
yeah,
this.
yeah, right. If you are a writer, write, because
Right.
you're not you're not doing yourself any good if you're not writing. So
Yeah.
thank you, John, so much. This is
My
awesome.
pleasure. This is
Yeah,
very fun.
I know. And thank you so much for tuning in to episode 34 of Typewriter Talks. We will be back next week or the week after. We'll see for episode 35. Happy
Whatever.
New Year. John, I love you. Thank you for
Love
sharing
you too.
all your stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to know more about Keep St. Pete Lit, you can go to keepstpetelit.org. We have writers meetups, poetry, open mics, book clubs, online classes, all kinds of good things. One-stop writing shop. It's kind of reading and writing shop. Let's
You
look
do everything.
well, I don't know what to say. But thank you so much, and Happy New Year, and see you soon.